when you present yourself with a sense of confidence and passion and excitement. If you're all about your work, it gives your client a real sense of trust, knowing that you're going to be able to take this thing and produce something really great.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. This week we chatted to 3D motion designer and art director Mitch Myers. Most of you probably know him from the After Effects branding he did with Generalist. We chatted about his journey from working in an agency to his first year as a freelancer. He talked a bit about how he got his clients and things like that, so that was really awesome. I also wanted to just say thank you so much for all of you who've shared the podcast so far. We had a really, really good response for TJ's episode from last week. So if you haven't listened to that, you can go back and listen to episode 11. I really appreciate it when you all share the episodes on social media and with your friends, because it really, really helps get the podcast out there, and it gives me a chance to get more awesome guests on the show as well. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Mitch. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to jump right in and ask you about the After Effects branding you did with JR Canes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Totally. I mean, that was a really insane experience to, have in your career. I never thought I would be the person to actually design a After Effects kind of like brand identity. And I was basically just sitting in bed one night and got an email from Adobe, and they, right off the bat just asked me if I would be interested in jumping on the project. They mentioned that they run through Behance profiles all the time, and I was their top pick to do it along with JR, because we had kind of totally different styles. He's really 2D oriented, and I'm, of course, really 3D based. And I looked through the deck that they sent, and it was really interesting what kind of wordage they used. They gave us almost 100% creative freedom. Basically, it was just use these colors, and that's it. So we had, I think it was a month to complete it, and it was probably the busiest month of my life, because it was the first month I was freelance. I was presenting at SIGGRAPH in LA for Cinema 4D. I was doing my first project with the Mill too, and then the Adobe thing as well. So I was a bit nervous, but there was no way I was not going to take it. So I definitely went ahead and jumped on that, and me and JR got on a video call right away and started discussing possibilities and where we could take this thing, and it turned out really great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. And in your first month of freelance as well, it's really impressive. There's a few things I want to go back through what you just said. So you said that they found you on Behance, right? Do you think that people get a lot of work through that? What's your kind of experience with that? Because I haven't heard like that much about people getting loads of work through it. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I never really used Behance prior to going freelance. And truthfully, the only reason I updated my Behance and everything was I was working at the agency that I was at before I went freelance, and it was in the process of me deciding whether I should go freelance or stay in the agency world. That kind of like fight going on in my head. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to post that I am freelance on my Behance profile and just see what kind of traffic I get from it, and see if this is even a possibility for me to be successful as a freelancer. So that's when I started updating my Behance profile, and I got a handful of client requests just from changing my occupation to freelance. So I mean, I think from my perspective, it was a lot of artists just going on Behance and looking at different artists for inspiration and stuff. That's what I always thought it was. But I do think there are some agencies that are trolling around Behance looking for the right style for their upcoming project too.
Yeah, that's really interesting because like you said, I thought that too. And especially with Dribbble as well, like it seems to be more like an inspiration kind of platform. So yeah, that's really interesting. So you originally started out as a musician. I think that's quite funny because many people who get into this industry start out in music in some way. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into doing design and stuff?
Yeah, I've actually noticed that too. That a lot of musicians are motion designers or artists, and a lot of artists and motion designers are musicians too. I never really thought I was going to be in this career that I'm in now because, from probably seventh or eighth grade, I was all about music and I knew what I was going to do with my life with music. And I was going to, be a musician for the rest of my life. And directly out of high school, I moved to North Carolina and lived in a recording studio for probably about a year. And I did some guitar tech type work and guitar production. And, it was pretty fun. I was kind of just living life day to day and seeing what possibilities kind of come my way. And eventually this band called The Stained Glass Romance came along and started recording some of their new CD in the studio, and they just lost their guitarist. And so I did some recording for them, did some live shows with them too, and ended up jumping on full time with them. And it was crazy as we were signed to Victory Records. We did a couple of music videos. I was on tour probably like 10 months out of the year. And it was, I went from, waking up on a couch every morning to waking up in a tour bus every morning. And it was pretty big change, but I had a lot of downtime on the tours when we were traveling. So I started doing merchandise design for the other types of bands that we were touring with, just because it kind of let the time go by quicker. And I guess I did have some sort of underlying passion for design and things like that, whether it was newly founded when I was on tour or if I just always had that, I'm not really sure. But I just started doing t-shirt designs, things like that. And then once I got out of the music scene, I came back home and I opened up Cinema 4D for the first time and just ultimately fell in love with cinema and 3D and started messing around with that. And then after that, got Adobe After Effects and learned more about that side of the motion design world too, and decided that was going to be my the career that was going to envelop my life for the rest of my days, I guess. And I just went at it full force and tried to make something of myself in that type of field.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you kind of made the jump from being at an agency and then into freelance and what kind of things you did to prepare for that?
It was an incredibly hard decision to make, like incredibly hard. Probably one of the hardest things I've had to really do with my life as far as taking a different direction with it. I have a wife and a 4-year-old girl. She was 3 at the time. And it was, a crazy situation where, if I were to go freelance and I were to not make any money or not have the type of clients that I want and stuff like that, would it even be worth it? Or, even things as serious as would we lose our house or not be able to pay the bills and things like that. So, those types of situations run through your head, and almost, the anxiety filled part of my brain would come up with totally probably unrealistic things that would happen, but still just as scary. At the agency that I was at, I wasn't completely happy with the type of work that we were doing. The people that I worked with were absolutely amazing, but it just didn't feel right. It wasn't the type of life that gave me some sort of natural happiness. So I knew that I needed to make a change, and it was difficult to decide whether, hey, maybe it's the agency that's the issue and I should just go to a different agency. Maybe it'll be different, or, freelance needs to be the route that I take. And it was also scary in the fact that what if I go freelance and I'm still not happy? Is this even the right career for me? So I was kind of in this deep kind of pit of not knowing what I'm doing at all. It was pretty difficult, but with the support of my wife and everything, it was a lot easier to kind of just take the plunge. Got my website up and running. I got my new reel and just kind of started shopping myself around. that's one good thing about me. Like I've always had the entrepreneur kind of like mindset, and I love to market myself as like a personal brand and everything. So I think that helps me a lot to kind of jump off and get this freelance thing rolling. And now I'm probably about halfway through my first year of freelance, and it's been really amazing. We've done some insane projects for insane clients, and I can't believe it's only been like half a year so far.
Yeah, that's crazy. I just wanted to go back a bit. So, how long were you working at the agency and like what kind of things were you doing there?
Yeah, I was at the agency for 2 years. Before that, I was working actually for the St. Louis Rams, the football team, and we were doing a bunch of broadcast stuff and documentary style work for like NFL Network. And so the agency after that was called Vidzu Media, and they produce amazing work. It's like an amazing group of people. We're based here in St. Louis, Missouri. And we had some awesome clients too. We were working for clients like Ulta and Sam's Club, Southwest Airlines. I mean, there was some large names in that. It was pretty cool work. A lot of it was like internal corporate kind of deliverables. But even though I was, doing some cool work with some cool people, it just didn't feel right as far as just the type of 9 to 5 lifestyle that I was kind of living through that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will relate to you in the way that, you had a wife and a child and stuff, and you were worried about trying to support them and things like that. So is there anything in particular that you did? You said like you're quite good at developing your personal brand. Did you already kind of have a website before you were freelancing, and were you building up that momentum before you kind of made the jump? I'm just trying to get into like, what kind of things do you think people could do if they're kind of in a similar situation?
Yeah, I had a website before, and it was mostly to just put up my new work, put up any new reels that I may produce, things like that. But I didn't start really getting into making it something of worth almost to like shop around to the types of people that I'd want to send it around to until I knew that I was going to possibly make the jump to freelance. So I wanted to make sure that my personal branding was like on key with what type of artist that I felt I was. I wanted to make sure that my motion reel was as solid and polished as I could possibly be. It was a lot more strict on my end as far as how I started running myself as a personal brand rather than a motion designer as part of a larger agency. So I had to start thinking a little bit differently that I'm not going to have anything to fall back on as far as anybody pushing me to be able to get these types of clients or anything like that. I knew I was going to have to do all the work on my end. I was going to have to be the one to shop for the clients. I was going to be the one to do all the paperwork. I was going to be the one to, be the producer, be the motion designer, be the editor, whatever they needed me to be. So I had to make sure that my mind was right, knowing that I had a lot more extra responsibilities on my shoulders in order to be successful. So making sure that everything was as crisp and clean and professional as possible and it represented me well was definitely key in maintaining that initial trust that a client will give you when they're shopping around for the right motion designer or visual effects artist for their next project.
So you think it's about a mindset kind of thing where you're starting to think of yourself more as like a business owner than just an artist?
Definitely, because if you were to jump freelance just with the artist mindset, and artist mindset as in sitting at your desk, producing the work, wrapping up the work, and then going about your day, then you're missing a lot of the extra responsibility that needs to happen, the extra work that needs to happen in order for you to be successful as a freelancer. Because at an agency, you're kind of like a small cog in a bigger machine, and you can fall back on like the producer to send out the deliverable to the client or get revisions or anything like that back from the client and deliver it to you. And there's a lot of cushioning that goes on in an agency world that you don't really notice until you go freelance. It's like, wow, I was kind of babied almost. I didn't have to do a lot of work that a lot of other people were taking care of so I could be the motion designer. And now you have to take care of keeping the client as happy as possible with all the client communications, with invoicing, with making sure that your time is 100% so you don't send any invoicing that isn't necessarily correct. You have to make sure that your pricing is on par with your abilities. You got to make sure that you're shopping yourself out there, talking to the right people. It's a lot of work, but if you're really into it, it can be really a satisfying kind of lifestyle to maintain. You know, if you're successful, it's all on your shoulders and you're the reason that you were successful.
Yeah. So are you working kind of more direct to client than, say, with agencies, or is it kind of a bit of both?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but actually majority of my clients have been through agencies on East and West Coast. I've worked for some really great agencies like The Mill New York and Frameworks out of LA. It's been pretty great to have like the agency kind of still part of my world, because I do love working with a larger group and kind of seeing how the agency reacts to the type of work that I'm sending them and how they market that work and stuff like that, and almost learning from them too. Since I'm newly freelance, I can have those references to ask some questions to and things like that, and kind of follow in those footsteps to make sure that I'm being almost a successful one-man agency as well.
Yeah. So do you think it's harder to get remote work? Like, have you had any difficulty in that, or how have you kind of dealt with that side of things?
Yeah, I haven't really had any issues getting really any type of work, which has been incredibly, I'm really blessed to kind of be able to say that. And I've done my work as far as, emailing as many people as possible. When I'm kind of feeling that maybe a drought's coming along, I'll hit up the type of clients that I've already had and some new ones, just kind of going around seeing if anybody has any projects that are coming up, if they want to put a hold on my schedule for anything in the future. A lot of my clients now know that my schedule fills up quickly. So they'll be, the first ones to almost contact me instead of the other way around and be like, hey, what's your schedule looking like for this date? And get back with us because we'll put a hold on that time if you're free, which is awesome because usually a lot of the emails that I'm answering are booking emails instead of, begging for work type emails, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, that's really good. So when you kind of started, because it wasn't that long ago being a freelancer, how did you kind of start reaching out to people? Was there anything you were doing in particular that you found was helpful?
Yeah, I'm the type of person to kind of take nothing and make it something, and I'm not really scared to do so. And when I first started thinking about going freelance, I really did have nothing as far as clientele or contacts. So my way of doing it was to go online, look up the type of agencies and people that I would like to work for, go on those websites, search for like a creative director's email or director's email somewhere in their website, and copy paste, write a quick email with my motion reel attached, and that I would be really psyched to work for them and just hope for an email back. And I just did that with as many people as possible and just put myself out there. And I think that's one of the very important things to do when you're becoming a freelancer, is to not be afraid to kind of just shop yourself as much as possible and, become the person that is really comfortable with talking about yourself, because it's not a bad thing to be all about your own work, especially when you're the only one representing yourself. And, if you're confident about your abilities, then it creates some confidence in the client when they're about to, send that check over too.
Yeah, definitely. I think confidence is a massive thing, and it's probably like the hardest thing when you start being a freelancer. just having that confidence. But then after a time, it kind of gets easier and you're like, oh, people like me. People are giving me work. I definitely felt like that as well at the beginning. So I think it's good for everyone to hear that everyone kind of feels like that. And then you've just kind of got to push yourself out there a bit, like you say. So you were kind of cold emailing people, but were you considering your own work and like how that fit in with a certain agency, because you're doing 3D and VFX. So I was wondering if you're targeting particular agencies because that's kind of your niche.
Definitely. I was targeting specific agencies because of the type of work that I enjoy doing. And thankfully, a lot of the agencies that I was targeting were agencies that I've followed and I've seen their work. And I was like, oh man, like, these guys are amazing, and I would love to kind of produce something for them, or like my style is very similar to theirs. I might be a good fit. There was some thought in the back of my mind of like, if they do see my work, they will possibly see that, oh, he can probably produce something that's going to look like the agency produced it. It was part of, their work. So I think that does give you a leg up on the whole getting the right types of work, is when they see your work on your website and they can kind of compare it to what they've produced already and the quality level of that. And if it's on par, then they don't have to worry about producing something that's of lesser quality than what they have in the past, and they don't lose any sort of clientele from it on their end.
Yeah. Do you think it's hard to get into the 3D and kind of VFX industries?
I don't necessarily think. I feel like, it could be just as hard as the 2D stuff. I'm not in that 2D world as much as I used to be. I used to be a little bit more jack of all trades, I guess you'd call it, where I could do any type of 2D work that you would need, any 3D stuff, visual effects, things like that. And it wasn't until I really started to dive deep into Cinema 4D and then jumped into Octane Render as well. And I've always been in love with 3D, but I felt like I found my place when I started to really mold myself into being the best that I could possibly be in that area. And that's just where I, stuck myself. I can still do 2D work as well, but my real passion lies in the 3D stuff. So, I mean, when I'm out there trying to get, 3D type work, just kind of comes to me because I'm going after the people that do the 3D work, from the types of projects that I've done already and the types of people that I've talked to. I think my name is getting around a little bit about my 3D kind of style and the type of work I can produce too. So I think people are coming towards me with the type of 3D work that I already do. So I think it could go either way. I mean, if you're that 2D pro and is producing amazing animations and really fluid work, I mean, I feel like it would be almost the same situation where people like Giant Ant and things like that would be coming to you being like, hey, like, you're amazing, let's work together. Agencies want to be getting the best freelancers they can to produce their work, just like the freelancers want to be getting the best type of work from the best agencies and standalone clients too. So it's a two-way street for sure.
Yeah. So do you think that it's kind of better to say, oh, I'm a 2D artist, I'm a 3D artist, rather than be like, oh, I'm a generalist? Because I think people think that, oh, if I can do everything, then I'll get more work. But my opinion is that I think actually if you're like known for doing like one thing really well, then maybe that would be more helpful, because when people want that thing, you're like the top of mind, whereas if you're just doing a bit of everything, I don't think you could, learn enough about each thing and kind of jack or Jill of all trades, master of none, I feel like it's better to kind of find your niche, your style, things like that, and then pitch yourself out in those kind of areas.
I agree. When it comes to freelancing, especially, standing out is one of the more important things about how you have to manage your career. So when you do become a specialist in something, it helps you stand out a lot more than if you were a jack of all trades that kind of is in the murkiness of the, the mid-range type work where, a lot of people are trying to get, anything they can from, any type of client that they can. And it's a lot simpler almost to be a specialist, buckle down and become the best that you can possibly be in the type of area that you feel the most comfortable and the most happiness from too. And, those agencies and clients will come right directly to you if you produce the type of work in the right quality that they're looking for. You will be at the top of the list, and you really won't have to worry too much about maintaining work because, whenever you have a slow period, you've either made enough money to weather the storm and not really worry about it, or you'll get that random email right when you're like, oh, I'm about to have like 2 weeks off, and a client will have, a 2-week project for you to be on randomly. It's happened so many times to me to where I'll be like, well, I guess I have like a 3-week vacation coming up. And then, the day of my first day off or whatever, I'll have like a client come right to me with like some big project that they need someone on right away. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not taking time off now. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's one of the harder things actually. Once you get going, you're like, okay, I need to like block time out to do stuff like take holidays or work on different personal projects and things like that because, the work will just keep coming. And I think sometimes I try and like say, no, I can't, I'm going to have that week off because I want to work on some stuff like Motion Hatch or, whatever. And do you feel like you do that quite a lot?
Yeah, I do try to block some time out for personal stuff, especially with my personal experimentations that I like to do just to kind of build myself as an artist and post on social and things like that for other people to see. I need that a little bit extra time to learn rather than just keep grinding away at client projects. But I think it's important as a freelancer and a new freelancer to take as many clients as possible, at least probably your first year is at least the way I feel, because you are building your initial client list and you don't want to give up a really cool project with a really cool agency that could be, paying top dollar for your work on a regular basis. If you put them off too much, that client will possibly just end up going to someone else just because, they'll see that your schedule's always full. They can hardly ever get in with you. And it's just much easier to go with someone else who is willing to take the kind of job. So I think your first year when you're building your client list, I've been a little bit more open to taking as much projects as I can and then taking the time off when my mind and body really need it and then jumping back into it. And probably my second or third year, I'll take it a bit easier on myself once I have the type of client list that I can fall back on and, maintain and have trust with.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think it's just important to say as well, like, maybe your first year you do a lot of things and work with a lot of different clients, but also try and just like carve out a bit of time for yourself and your family and things like that. I always try and think about balance and stuff. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So since being freelance, were there any kind of mistakes that you made or anything you wish you knew before going freelance?
Yeah, I think, going freelance, the mindset, it has to change so drastically from going from agency to freelance, just from those extra responsibilities. I think the main thing that I wish that I had when I first started out is being in the mindset of a producer and motion designer and, accountant, and knowing that I need to be on top of those things as much as possible. I think I overwhelmed myself a bit in the very beginning because all these things were kind of shocking to my usual schedule. And I didn't really understand, how I was supposed to go about it and what I was really doing because it was so new. So, knowing what you're really getting into and what you need to do as an entrepreneur, reading any sort of books on the market, I think is pretty awesome. I just read Damn Good Advice by George Lois, and that's an awesome book just for the normal artist to kind of get your mind right as far as just being the strong artist that fights for his work. And I think that's very important too as you're going freelance, because you have no one else that's going to fight for you, and you're going to be your worst critic, and you need to be your best critic as well as in front of clients in order to get high quality work. Because before anybody else can have trust in you, you have to have trust in yourself to be able to accomplish these goals that you've set out as a freelancer.
Yeah, I think it's good advice for, say, like people to read books that aren't necessarily related to our industry and things like that. Like I read a lot of books about, marketing and getting work and different things, because it just, we can't all take just the advice that's only in our industry. I think it's good to kind of look at what the people are doing in other creative industries and things like that to get work and stuff. So I think that's a really cool idea. What's the one thing that you learned as a freelancer that you think might help the audience?
I think the main thing that I've learned as a freelancer is who you are as, a person, and what kind of things you need in your life to really make you happy. I think most of the time, a 9-to-5 kind of job at either an agency or any type of business that you're doing artwork for, or things like that. I mean, it can be really satisfying to some people, especially if you're working with the type of agency and working around the type of people that you enjoy. It can be very satisfying. But with me, it was, I could have some really fun days and really come home happy and things like that. But there was always kind of like a piece of me almost missing. And I was really dealing with anxiety and depression. And I think that really came from feeling that I was in a place that I necessarily wasn't supposed to be in. And that was scary, both as in the career choice that is the issue, or is it where I'm at currently in my career that's the issue, or do I set too high of goals for myself? All those things become questions when you're feeling like you're in a place of not knowing. And I think being very courageous to make big changes in your life is something very important to develop the right kind of happiness in your day-to-day life that allows you to be the type of person that you want to be and produce the type of work that you want to produce and live your life the way I think it's meant to be lived. I've gained a lot more freedom, and I've gained a lot more passion for what I'm doing day to day. And it's helped me grow much quicker as an artist because I'm all about it every day, all day. I'm grinding, but I'm having an extreme amount of fun doing it. And it's very important to kind of feel that rush with life that I think a lot of people lose with the kind of almost monotony of a day-to-day kind of 9-to-5 grind. And I'm not saying it's always bad, because some people I think really do enjoy that kind of lifestyle, and then that's great. But, if you're feeling that kind of hole in your life that you're not sure where it's coming from, maybe it's that, maybe you just need a big change.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, freelance isn't for everyone, but then if you kind of make that jump and try that out, I think, a lot of people can find a lot more freedom in their lives. And that's kind of, a bit why I do this podcast, is just to kind of open people's mind up a bit to what the possibilities can be. Like, I know some freelancers, who travel around the world, or some freelancers who kind of do it because they want to spend more time with their family and work more remotely and different things like that. So I think that's like a really cool thing to talk about. So pricing yourself as a freelancer, I think, is like one of the hardest things. Do you have an idea of like average rates in the 3D and VFX world? Because being a kind of 2D motion designer, I have no idea. And I like to talk about pricing on this podcast. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't really have an idea of like an average price in this world, because I mean, majority of the time I'm just dealing with my own price and what I feel is worth my time.
Right.
And I price myself accordingly. And I like to give my clients a bit of a choice in the pricing too, because I feel like it gives them a little bit more control over their project that they may not feel that they have a whole lot of control over anymore once they get to hiring me. So I give a day rate and an hourly rate option.
Okay.
And my day rate is for 10 hours and it's at $850 for a full day. Or they can choose my hourly rate, which is $100 an hour, which gives them a little bit more flexibility because they can choose how many hours a day they want me to work, possibility. Whereas the day rate, if I work any time during the day, that day rate is in full effect still. So it gives them a little bit of a choice when determining what's best for their type of budget and their types of deadlines and things like that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I just wanted to ask how you kind of came up with your rate, and was there any way you did that? Because you said that you didn't really know kind of what the average rates were. So I'm just wondering how you kind of came up with that pricing structure.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about going freelance, I met with as many freelancers as I possibly could, and even the local agencies that were around my area too, just to talk with their creative directors and things like that, and get an idea of what they were looking for in a freelancer and the types of rates that they were comfortable with, things like that. And with my freelance friends, they weren't necessarily in the type of field that I'm in. Some of them were like editors and cinematographers and things like that, but I could still at least get a vibe on what type of rates were around the industry, even though it wasn't my specific field. And for example, when I went to my cinematographer friend and director friend, I met with both of them at the same time, and we just got some coffee. And I was like, if you were to do a short film and you wanted to hire a visual effects artist, would you be cool with $100 an hour? And they were like, yeah, totally, especially with your type of work and things like that. They said they would be perfectly fine with $100 an hour. I knew that I didn't want to jump into freelance with an incredibly high rate. I don't want to overprice myself and not get any work, but I also don't want to underprice myself and just kind of be screwed getting a lot of clients at that price range and then having to bump it up and potentially pissing off people, which is no good. So I was very careful with picking out what type of rate I was comfortable with, but I knew that the type of work that I could produce was worth something as well, and I was confident in that. So that's basically just how I came up with the types of rates that I have. It's something that I'm comfortable with as an artist and who or what type of work I'm creating. And I'm confident in pushing that too, which I think is very important. If you're not really confident with the type of rate that you're pushing towards your clients, then your client's not going to be very confident that you can produce the type of work that is worth that. So being very on top of what type of quality you can create and making sure that the rate represents that.
Yeah, I think that's really clever. Like, you kind of went out and did your research a little bit, and that's what happens a lot. I think people go around going, well, what's your rate? What's your rate to other freelancers? But I'm just trying to like open up these conversations so people get an idea of different rates and different things. And obviously all dependent on loads of different stuff, like whether you're working remotely, what kind of work you're doing, who you're working for, like what country you live in, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that 3D and VFX artists get paid a little bit more than 2D artists? Because from what you said, like, it seems like a little bit higher than I'd say a 2D rate. I mean, I would encourage people to charge what they think they're worth, but I just wanted to know like your opinion on that in general.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a possibility that 3D is a little bit higher as far as rates go than your 2D artists, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of the top 2D people, like JR maybe, I don't know his rate off the top of my head, so I could be totally wrong, but some of the top 2D people may be getting some higher rates out there too. But I'm not specifically sure if there's a total differential when it comes to pricing yourself out in a 2D space rather than a 3D one. But as long as you're creating top quality work, no matter what kind of area it's in, then I think you can price yourself accordingly. And as long as you're confident in selling yourself, then the client's going to be okay with paying that.
Yeah, I think it's about having the confidence to be like, this is my rate and I'm kind of going to stick to it, and I always kind of base it around a range. So, I've got like my normal rate, and then I'll kind of have a rate that I will like negotiating room basically. And, it depends on the client and the project and everything, like how that goes. But I always think like, oh, I will not go below this rate. You know what I mean? Because I think that's like quite a good strategy. So then you know exactly when you have to say no to somebody because you've already set those parameters in your head, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Usually I'll, for a client that I really want to work with, or maybe even a first project with a certain client to kind of lock them down, I'll give them maybe a 15% discount. I call it like a cool project discount. And I'll give them that just for, just to send off some good vibes that I'm working to make their lives easier and things like that, and possibly get some more work from them at my full rate later on. But I think it's very important when you do send the invoicing to make sure that you put the hours that you worked, the cost that it would have been before the discount. So they do see that number and they do see that you're giving them a discount on it. So they don't expect that rate every single time. And they get it in their head that like, okay, this time he gave us a discount. It would have been this price. So we probably need to be comfortable if we want to hire him more. We need to be comfortable with this type of price later on. So I think it's pretty important to keep in mind when you are giving discounts, to pop that in your client's head and make sure they don't keep hiring you at the discounted rate or keep wanting to hire you at that rate.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I've heard some other people say that as well. Like if you are going to lower your rate for someone for a particular reason, you definitely have to show that on the invoice, because then next time they can't be like, but last time you charged us this, and because they will do that.
Exactly.
If there's one piece of advice that you would like the audience to take away from this, what would that be?
I think the most important piece of advice that I could probably give would be to be as strong-minded as possible, especially when you're getting to this freelance world. And be very, very confident with yourself. Be your own biggest fan, because like I said, like you don't have anybody else being your cheerleader anymore. So you have to be the one to sell yourself, and knowing how to sell yourself properly and professionally is extremely important when you're the only one representing your work. That can take you extremely far in this type of field. When you present yourself with a sense of confidence and passion and excitement, if you're all about your work, it gives your client a real sense of trust, knowing that you're going to be able to take this thing and produce something really great, and you're not going to have to worry about it, because the producers and creative directors on the other end are stressed out already, and they need you to be the one to take the weight off their shoulders almost. So it's really important to make sure that you are the type of person to be able to take that and make something great, and know that you have the confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think it's really important to, remember that at the end of the day, you're trying to help your client as well as like make some cool stuff, because I think a lot of people just concentrate on, oh, I just want to make like cool animations, and they don't really think about what they're kind of offering the client and what the client's trying to do with their message. So I think that's really great. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast, and I look forward to hearing some of your podcasts in the future too. I always listen to this show.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. You can find Mitch's work at mitchmyers.tv and on Instagram at Mitch Myers Official and Twitter at Mr. Mitch Myers. Thanks so much again to Mitch for coming on the show and being so open about his freelance career. I think these open conversations really help everyone, and I hope that we can have more conversations like that with a lot more people. I appreciate all the guests that have come on the show so far. Now, if you enjoy this podcast and it helps you, please do consider hopping over to our brand new Patreon page. If you support the podcast over there, you can do things like ask future guests questions or get early access to the show and loads more awesome stuff. So if you go to patreon.com/Motion Hatch and just check that out, that would be great. It really helps me cover the cost of producing this podcast, and hopefully will help with future endeavors of Motion Hatch as well. As an added bonus, if you join us as a patron this week, then Mitch will be doing a live Q&A for all the patrons, so you can ask him anything that you want. So all you have to do is go over there and support one of the tiers, and then you'll get access to that live AMA. So thanks for listening. Take care.